Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can implement get, post, patch, and delete using the retrofit. So let's begin to start with the adding dependencies. So first of all, I'm adding the retrofit. Second dependency, we need the converter JSON for our retrofit. Another dependency we need for the view model. So I'm adding lifecycle extensions. And another uh, dependency I'm adding to enable the logging in the retrofit. So I'm adding logging interceptors. It should be interceptor. So using this we can enable the logging, like we can print URL headers and request response. And since we are going to make the API call, so I'm adding the permission in our manifest. And before we start with the UI, so let's implement the retrofit instance and retrofit service. So this class will basically return a function or the instance of the retrofit. And we need to pass the base URL. So I found a portal where they have some options to call get, post, patch, and delete. So I'm just using the same URL. So there are few options you can see. So I'm using the base URL that is basically mentioned here, the first one. So I'll be using this, but we'll pass users from as a repository from our retro service class. And here we'll add the converter JSON. And as we added a dependency to enable the logging, so I'm now enabling the logging for to print requests and response and headers. And we'll pass this client in our retrofit. We'll use the same client dot build. So this is the way we can enable logging for our retrofit. Now I am adding another class or interface for our retro service. And here, as we already know, we define some functions with their HTTP method. So first function, I'm creating it to get user list. So this function will return the list of users. And for that, we need to define a data class. So let's create first a data class. I'm giving it as named user list. And let's see what data this URL is returning. So let's see how data is look like. So let's copy this and format it properly so that it should be readable. So you see the data, name, email, gender, status. So it should be an array of data types, and now I'm creating another data class which is user type, and there we'll keep the same name. We missed the ID, so let's get the ID also. And few more parameters. We'll use the same name what is defined in the response. And let's keep the ID on as a first parameter. And now this get user list will return the list of users, user type. And we need this URL needs some headers also. So we'll pass headers as well from here. It should be headers, and we'll pass both the headers what is defined inside the URL. And these headers should be comma separated, and that's it. So this is the way we pass the headers for our API. Now I'm creating another function to create a user, which is going to be the post request. And similarly, we'll pass all the headers which is needed for our post request. And you see, like, the third header is the access token. So just to get the access token, you need to create an account on this portal. I already created an account, so I have the access token. I'm simply passing that access token in my request header. So I'm currently hard coding it. You can keep it in your project somewhere, or you can generate it like some of the servers and give you at the runtime. But here I'm just hard coding. And the body is going to be the user type, which we already defined in the user list data class. And it is going to return another data class that is I'm giving it as name user response, and should have code, meta, and a data of user type. So we'll be using that user response type here. Another function will be needed to search. I'm going to show you how you can type some text and make the API call and display it on a recycler view. So this search text will be getting from the edit text. So this is going to be the another get API we are going to use. So this is the first API. This is going to be the second API, which is going to take the search as the input parameter. Let's see how it look like. Okay, name equal to some value. Yeah, so this URL will like be this. And another another request which is going to return just the user data based on the user ID. So this function I'm going to use for the edit purpose. So we'll be passing the user ID, get the data, show it in the edit tags, and then user is updating, and then it will update the same request. So this is going to be the particular data based on the user ID. So this is how it's gonna be the response. Now we need another function for the patch. Like patch is like whenever we are updating just the record data. So when we are updating name, like name, email, so by that time we'll be calling patch. And similarly, it need body, path, and we need another function to call delete. So this function will simply delete that record, but we don't need a body for that function. Now let's create our UI in the main activity. So I'm simply adding one edit text on the top and a button which is going to call search. Under that I'll be adding a recycler view, and I'll be adding a button just to call the create user activity. So view will be having a user list, and this button will call a create activity, like we can create a new user using the post. So this button will call that. So first function, we need to initialize our recycler view, which we already defined in our activity. And as we already know, for recycler view, we need a layout manager. We need to add a decoration like separator between the rows, and then we need an adapter. So we'll be creating all these. Now I'm creating a adapter for our recycler view. And inside the onCreateView holder, we just need to inflate the layout. And at this point of time, we need to create our layout file. We'll pass the same name here. Now we'll design our layout. So I'm simply adding 3 text view, one for name, one for email, and one for status. And now simply we'll set the data like name, email, and status. Now we'll set the same adapter to our recycler view in the main activity. Now we should create another class. Now for the view model, so I'm creating a view model for our main activity. So this mutable live data is for the list on the recycler view. So we need to create a function which is going to return this recycler list data. And we need another function which is going to call our retrofit, and the function we define inside our retro service interface. We'll call get user list, this one. And inside our main activity, now we'll initialize our view model. If there is no data, then we'll simply show a toast. And when we receive the data, we'll simply set it to the adapter. And now we'll call this init view model function. We'll create another function for the handling the search. So if edit text like search input box is empty, then it will simply load the whole list. Else it will make the API call to get the result based on the parameter entered in the edit text. I'm creating a separate function inside our view model, and we'll call the same function which you define inside our retro service, and it will call what user has entered. So we'll call now the same function from the main activity. Let's run and see how it look like. So we are able to retrieve the list, but it's as usual we made the same mistake like match parent. We need to change it in our recycler raw list XML. So now we are able to retrieve the list. That's great. Now let's see how search look like. It's not returning any result. Let's see. As I said, like we are enabling the logging in our retrofit. So this is how we can print the logs. We can see the request, response, headers, everything. So let's see what's the mistake we made. So there are no result for that particular text. So it's taking search name equal to search. Okay, so there is a mistake. We are passing that button here instead of edit text ID. So I'll change it here. Now rerun and see. Now you're typing. There you go. So search is also working now. So let's change the text. There you go. So search is working. We are able to retrieve the data. So get method is successfully implemented. Now I'm creating a activity for create new user, and there we'll implement a post function first. So I'm adding edit tags for entering a name and email. And this is for the email. So I'm just going to take 2 inputs as of now. You can add as much as possible. And the button, which is going to call create. And another function which is where we'll be implementing the delete user. So I'm adding that button as well. Here we need to create another view model for our create new user activities. I'm creating another view model for implement post, patch and delete. As usual, since we have created a view model, so we need to initialize it in our activity. So I am calling that, copying that code from the main activity and putting it inside our create new user activity. Now we'll be creating same observers. So one live data we need for create new user. That's going to be the user response type. I'm copying the same function and will be modifying it, and instead of get user list we'll be calling create user function, and instead of it's user list, it should be user response. It should be the create user, this function. Now we'll call this function from our create new user activity. It should be the user response. And similarly we'll show a toast if there is no response. We'll call our toast failed to create any user, else we'll show toast and we'll say successfully created a user, new user, and simply we'll close this activity. Actually, let me put it inside the different function. we'll call it a create user observable. And now we'll handle this create button. Click listener. And this create user function will be called on the button click. So here we need to build the user object first. So first thing is the ID we need to pass. Second is what user entered in the edit text. And third parameter is what user entered in the email edit text. And it takes two more parameter. So I'm just hard coding those. Status I am sending active, and gender I am setting it as male. Now we'll call the create user function of our view model. We'll pass this user object. Now let's run and see. So we'll call on this create button. It's not doing anything. I think we forgot to handle this button click in our main activity. So let's handle this create button. So we'll simply start this activity. We'll call this activity create new user on the create button click. It's crashed. Let's see what we missed. So button name is create user button. So we use the different ID. Now let's run and see. There you go. Create is opening a new activity. Let's give a name, enter some name and email ID, and call create button. So it's actually, let's see the logs. I see the 200, 201. So user is created successfully here. Let's search. There you go. So our post is implemented successfully now. Let me create another user. I'm giving it as BBB. Created. I'm searching it now. There you go. So our post is also implemented successfully. That's great. Now to implement patch, or we can say edit, we need to handle the recycler view click on the row click, so that on row click we can call this create new user activity. Then we'll get the data and pre-filled the name and email, and user can add it and then call the update button. So let's handle the click first of the using the adapter. We'll build an intent. function will call create new user activity. And from this activity we'll pass the user ID to the create new user activity, so that based on that user ID we can make a API call and get that user data, and we'll pre-fill that edit text, both the edit text. And when we are modifying this any record, any user, at that time if we are reloading, so our recycler view should get the updated record. That's the reason I call start activity with result. So here in the create new user activity, we'll retrieve the user ID first, and we'll use the same name what we passed from the previous activity, and we'll use the same. And first thing, based on the user ID, we'll load that user data. But we have to check null because we are reusing the same activity, so make sure we always have the null check, because this activity does not contains user ID when it is directly called to add a new user. It is only contains the user ID in case of edit. And this function will to load the user data. So when this observable will call, so it will contain some data, so we'll set it to our edit text, name and email. And at the same time we'll change the create button text to update, so that when we are coming for create, we should know we are coming for create, and when we are coming to update record, then it should show update. And at the same time we'll be changing the visibility of our delete button. So in case of edit, we can delete that record as well from the list. It should be get user. When get user currently have user list, so it should be user response. I should use the same live data, load user data, and we'll call it from our activity now. So viewmodel dot get our data, and we'll pass the user ID. And the create function need to be changed now, because the same function is going to call, but it should be conditional. If user ID is equal to null, then call create. If it is not null, then call update. So we need to create another function to update now inside our view model, and we'll be calling the same function update user, and we'll pass the user now. And similar change will make it here, but update need the user ID as well. So we'll add one more parameter. You see, it's need user ID and the user object. So user ID for the URL and user object is for the body. So we pass that user and we need to pass the user ID also. And since we are going to use the same observable, so let's change this method toast message also. So I'm keeping it common. You can have the separate observers also if you have to show some different messages. So let's see now. So I clicked on one data, it get the data, it set it to the edit text, and now I'm not seeing that delete button, so I'm changing it to visible now. It was still gone over it there, so it should be visible. And I'm putting some text calling update. There you go. So you see it's changed now, and we are able to retrieve the updated data also. I'm putting it back. There you go. So it's reloading. That's the reason I called on activity with result or start activity with result. You see it's reloading the whole list when we are coming back in case of editing. There you go. Perfect. Now we need to implement the delete button functionality. That is the last method. So for that I'm creating another function to delete. So it will simply delete a record from the list. And I'm creating another observable for delete. Delete just need the user ID, it doesn't need a body, so I removed it, and we'll be calling this from our activity. Before that we need to set the observable, and that is the delete, and we'll get the get delete observable. We don't need this, it don't need a user, it should be nullable. We'll set it, and once it need to handle if else, just to show the toast message. So let's copy this and add it here, and just will change the message successfully deleted user. And we already call this function on the delete button click. So let's see, it's create on create. Let me show you post again. So I'm creating a record, so create is working, search is working, I'm able to, but I'm still not able to see delete button, but it's updating the record. So let's see. Okay, so this ID need to be changed to this. It should be under the create button, but they are on the same place. So let's see it now. We give it a name AAA. I think we removed it. Let's create one more time. It's created, it's searching, click, we see the delete button now. That's great. So first time I'm showing you update, it's updating. Now I'm going to call delete and we'll search it again. It's not there. That's great. Now it's loading whole list. I'm creating one more time, one more record. It's created. Let's search it now. It's there. Now you are able to see that I'm updating it. Update is working fine. Now I'm showing you delete. Delete is also working. So guys, that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any question, you can ask in the comment section. Thank you.